запомнила.
Я тоже что-то запомнила. Она мне что-то говорила про, не знаю, какую-то свою подругу,
Да.
которая,
Ладно.
не знаю, что-то. Вот.
Надо, наверное, свет зажечь.
No, it's okay. Дима хотел что-то спросить.
Oh,
Что-то.
when you were in Russia, what did you eat?
What did I
Eat.
eat?
Скушай.
Это очень важно для Димы.
Арбузы.
Арбуз.
Там продавали арбузы?
Расскажи, как вы арбузы эти получали? Это хорошая история.
Ну, арбузы летом привозили колхозники с юга, где арбузы росли, привозили в город и продавали их.
Нет, ты мне рассказывал про баржи, на которых арбузы.
А на барже тоже, это когда те, которые ехали далеко по реке,
Ну.
они были нагружены на такую баржу.
Barge, that's what you call it.
Translation.
Ну что, хотите, чтобы я по-английски?
А мне все равно, но Дима хочет по-английски.
Да.
Ну хорошо. Do you want me to repeat that in English?
He got the bit about the barge. They were on the barge. Go ahead.
All right. The barge is a big boat, which is not propelled by itself, but something should carry
A
it.
little tugboat, maybe.
Huh?
A tugboat was pushing
Tugboat,
it.
yes. And they're simply just put on top, you know, like a big load. And we kids, and it was going down the river, and we kids
Don
there-
River, Don.
Don River, where we live. We good kids would swim toward that boat, and one of us, the most adventurous guy, would climb up the barge, grab the melon and throw it in the water. And melons wouldn't sink because they were still lighter than water. So they would just simply float. And the rest of the guys who were in water would grab one or two watermelons and swim it to shore. That's how we got the.
Sometimes the owner, the
Yes, there was usually a guard, an old man with a rifle. The rifle was loaded with salt, so that they would fire at us with the salt. Of course, it wasn't deadly, but it was very unpleasant when you get that salt in your behind. But it was worth getting the watermelons. Anything else? You asked me what we ate.
Yeah.
Well, most what we ate you can eat here too. Potato, tomato, cucumbers in the summer, any other vegetables that you could get. In the summer, the farmers would bring their produce to town and sell them to the people. And of course it was expensive compared to what they sold in government shops. So sometimes you could get that good stuff in government stores, but most often you couldn't get it. But farmers who brought their produce individually,
Were they allowed to do that?
yes.
from their own plots.
Oh.
Yeah, well, that was conditioned that they had their own plot, which they were allowed to have. I don't remember exactly what, but the plot was mostly around the house. And they lived in their houses, you know, the farmers' houses. And they had that plot around the house, which they worked themselves. They couldn't hire anybody. That was the condition, that they couldn't hire
And they could
anybody.
even have a pig or even
Huh?
a cow. They could even have a pig or a cow.
Yes, it varied depending on year, depending on conditions, but
So some years you could have a cow and some years you couldn't? What happened if you already had a cow and then you couldn't?
well, yes.
Then you were SOL, you had to,
You're allowed to have a cow, and you're allowed to get a pig, or you're allowed to have
Chickens?
chicken,
Yeah.
something like
And
that.
that's why they survived in the countryside better than in the cities.
That's right.
well, that's
And
what's
of
his
course-
face in Babi Yar writes where his
Yeah.
parents sent him to live in the village.
Yeah, because
Well, of
Because
course
the
it
village people had
varied,
food.
from place to place, from year to year, because certain years that I remember, it was possible.
What
But
about
some
that
years-
famine, the Stalin artificially induced famine? Did that impact you all?
Artificially, in the sense that they sent the grain to Europe, to Germany or to other places, and sold it cheaper than that country could sell. But of course, they got it from the peasants. So that was.
Well, that was when they were trying to force collectivization,
Since we
right?
lived near water, River Don, there was plenty of fish. Well, plenty, I mean, relatively speaking. If you go early to the market, you could find fresh fish and buy that. Of course, it was relatively expensive,
But tell about when the times were not so good, and they had coupons that you
yes.
Is
got.
that
Well-
during the war or before the war?
Well, in a period around 1930, it was really a famine. Ukrainians claimed that it was all done because they wanted to get to kill off Ukrainians, which is nonsense. Because everywhere in Russia, almost everywhere, situation was the same. There were shortages and people died. I saw many people in Rostov that came from villages somewhere around, and they didn't have anything to eat. So they thought that they came from villages to the towns because they hoped that in towns they could get better support, but it wasn't true, because living not living in the town in Rostov, they didn't get the coupons, or what do you call that, kartachki,
Yeah, coupons.
for bread or for other products.
Because if you came from outside, they gave it to the citizens of
Yeah,
the
because
town, but if you are a stranger comes in, you
didn't-
wouldn't get those
you wouldn't get.
coupons.
Well, it's like you didn't have a propiska or whatever,
Right,
so.
exactly.
That's right. So a lot of them were dying, and I saw many people who were just about dying. And there was even an incident that I always remember, that we were, father and I, of course, I was maybe 7, 8 years old, where people were lying on the streets. Some were dead, some were not yet dead. But for sanitation purposes, a cart, horse cart, was patrolling the place and picking up the dead body, putting it on cart and taking it to the cemetery where they were buried in a big common
Common
grave. So I remember that well because one day I was walking with my father. That man who attended the card wanted to pick up somebody, and my father said, "This guy is still alive. He's not dead." Oh, the card man said, "Don't worry about it. By the time we get to the cemetery, he'll be dead. Don't worry about it."